see.
Thank you again for coming, and we are recording this. It will go on YouTube so that everyone can see it. This is the second and what we hope will be a long number of meetings between the city and the deaf community, and I want to personally thank you for the turnout that we have seen at our recent city council meetings. It has been a pleasure to look from the dais and see so many individuals from the deaf and hard of hearing community in the audience.
Thank you, Lisa. So why don't we begin? We'll introduce some staff members that I had asked to join us. Vicki, why don't we start?
Are you going to use your mic?
Vicki Olteen, Director of Parks and Recreation.
I'm Jeannie Kays. I'm the Library Director.
Anthony Mejia, City Clerk.
Denise Goolsby, Office of Neighborhoods Manager.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Say it again, please.
Oh, Denise Goolsby, Office of Neighborhoods Manager.
Tabitha Richards. I'm in the Office of the Assistant City Manager.
I'm Cindy Cairns. I'm City Manager Special Assistant.
Can you say your name again, please?
Cindy Cairns.
And I'm David Reddy, City Manager.
What's your position, Cindy?
I'm Special Assistant to our City Manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Blaisdell. I'm the Public Information Officer.
Hi, I'm Paul Abshire, Lieutenant with the Palm Springs Police Department.
Thank you. So I appreciate you provided an agenda, so thank you for that. Why don't we just start at the top and work through the agenda?
Would you ask them their names, please?
Yes, your names.
Hold on just a second. Okay. Make sure it works good. Hello, my name is Philip. Last name is Rubin, and I've lived here for 12 years. I am a community advocate. Hello, my name is Ken Mikos, and I've lived here for 5 years. And I am Mary Ann Pugin, and I've lived in Palm Springs for 9 years now. The three of us are representing the deaf community.
So welcome. Oh, the first issue is on closed captioning, and I can give you an update there. The status of the implementation of our televised city council meetings. So the contracts have been signed with the company who's doing the closed caption. They're going to be up and ready by mid-August is what we're told. As you know, City Council will be on break in August, and so when we come back in September, we will be ready to go on closed captioning. The second item regarding...
That's great.
Good. Okay. Second item regarding closed captioning is the quality of local news. Unfortunately, we don't have much control over that. We're not certain how we can help. What I have asked Aaron, our IT director, to do, who could not be here this evening, he had some medical issues to attend to. He's going to reach out to them himself and just see if there's anything that his conversations might be helpful in seeing what their issues are.
I would appreciate a follow-up with KMIR. We've been working on that for several years. And many members of the deaf community has given up and are ready to file a suit with the FCC, with the Federal Communication Commission.
Do they say what their issue is? Do they tell you what the problem?
They're saying that the television station is too small. I was wondering of other possible solutions, if like in the event of emergencies, if there's some sort of text that could go out to community members. For important news updates, things like that. For the interim.
Yeah, so we've got, it's not Pixel, it's Red Alert or what?
Everbridge is what we use as well, yeah. The police department uses Everbridge to send out information on emergency road closures, or if there's a massive traffic accidents that's causing a big blocking of the streets, or if there's a flood or anything like that, use Everbridge alerts, and that's something that
Do they sign up? How
you
do they-
sign up. You can sign up through the I believe it's the city website, but on the fire department link. That's the last that I knew. I believe it was with the fire department link.
But we can get you direct information. Let's follow up and get them direct information, Amy.
Yes,
And in the event of an earthquake,
if you go to our website, it's palmspringsca.gov. You just go to the fire department page and you can sign up for Everbridge.
okay, I'm aware of that, good. And then I wanted to add one more thing to Phil's comment, and that is, it's not just us for deaf people in the community. There are a lot of hard of hearing people who live here in the valley as well that will definitely benefit from the closed captioning. We have a large senior citizen population and late deafened people. And so it's a much larger population than people might realize. It's not simply us completely deaf people. We are looking at veterans, we're looking at people who have become deaf later in life, who've lived there their whole life, snowbirds, that type of a thing. So it's quite a large population. It's not just an insular population of deaf people. And different languages as well, some speaking Spanish, not just English. And so we might want to figure out how to best reach out to all of those people. Thanks.
If you will give me some examples of issues that you've had with closed captioning on news programs locally, I will write a letter to the general managers of the local news programs and describe what we're trying to accomplish here and the issues that you've raised, and see if that helps generate a little bit more attention to the issue at the stations. And all it will do is let them know that we're interested in working on this. They have no responsibility to do what we ask them to do, but maybe it will help.
Yeah, the general manager, Jean. I can answer that, actually, MAP is saying. For the most part, when the anchors are seated at their desks reading from the teleprompter, that teleprompter is captioned. But any time that they have to ad-lib, there is no captioning for that. And the reporters who are on the street dealing with people around them being filmed live about issues that are coming up, those are also not captioned. So we miss out on a lot of information. Another issue is that the teleprompters often scroll by so quickly that you're like it's just soup and you can't read it. Sometimes the pictures of the accidents or whatever are not matching the actual content of the captions, or there's a delay, or the captions are too early for what is being visually referenced. And MAP is saying, so you can see it for yourself. You can have your own experience of that later if you turn on your TV and try to turn off the sound and depend exclusively on the captions. You'll see for yourself, in a 30-minute period, you'll get this experience that we have. You don't have to take our word for it. Try it out, you're on your own. And Philip is saying hearing it is very different than, you have to, in order to run the test correctly, you have to turn the sound off all the way and be dependent exclusively on the captions.
Is it both national and local news, or is it more of an issue with the local broadcast than the national news broadcast?
It's really the local.
Yeah, it's local news.
And so CNN, MSNBC, Fox, those,
Those are all perfect. We have no issues with those.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, move on to the next item of the Mizell Center. So two observations. One, obviously, that's a private organization, but they do receive some city funding.
Which one?
The Mizell? The Mizell. But they do receive some city funding. Now, Lisa, help me here. I think we certainly could request that they do that. You know, to what extent they're able to provide what interpreters for all of their programs, I don't know. But maybe if you could give us some examples of maybe if there's specific things that we could focus on.
Sure. Richard Bass is often providing lectures at Mizell in relation to preparations of death, wills, and so forth. I, as a community member, would like to go that. And I asked Richard for an interpreter there at Mizell. They refused to provide. They said it was up to me to bring my own and pay out of pocket for that type of thing. Yoga. The instructions on how to actually do yoga. There's no interpreter provided for things like that. So there's many things happening at Mizell that I would like to go, but I can't as a community member. I can't even be a member because they won't provide the access that's necessary.
And so you have asked, and they refused.
I did, yes, that's right, and they refused. Several times.
Who have you talked to?
I don't know, somebody at the front desk, I don't know who that particular person was.
Just the front desk?
But Richard Bass, but I don't know who Richard Bass contacted when I asked him in order to provide an interpreter.
So, I think the best thing would be for us to do a reach out to some of the people that we know at Mizell in their leadership and see where we can get with that. So I can take that on.
Okay, that would be great, Lisa, and I could envision that, we purpose a portion of their grant for interpreter services when they're asked, or maybe we even could up it a little bit for that, a specific grant for interpreter services. Okay, so
That would be wonderful.
Lisa will take the lead on that, and I will follow up. All right. Okay. All right, so
And
that's.
Marianne is saying, if you don't mind just taking a minute here, I'd like to kind of just point out that One Palm Springs, the organization itself, has taken its own initiative to provide American Sign Language interpreters for their upcoming September meetings. They took the initiative themselves to do that, which we appreciate so very much, because we're neighbors of this city too. And for me to, I mean, I would like to be able to go there and do that, and I'm wondering why don't other organizations such as Mizell take the initiative? And why do we constantly have to push and advocate for it? we talking about the organizations part now? So there's the Film Society, the International Palm Springs International Film Festival. Often they'll invite directors, they'll invite actors, and they'll give presentations after the movie to discuss the movie. And many of the deaf attendees, snowbirds and locals, would like to participate in that. But the problem is there's no communication access, no interpreters. And so I think it's important to advertise which particular movies will have speakers with interpreters so that we could pick, you know, that film instead of going to one that we're not sure if there's going to be access or not. So I do appreciate the newsletter, the magazine, the newspaper type thing that comes out, and they show, it's called DF, deaf friendly. That's a deaf friendly symbol, and it says deaf friendly films. That's wonderful. That's a great resource for me, and prevents us from picking the wrong movie to go and see. So it's not nice to go to a movie and not be able to follow what's going on. And so we don't know who came up with that deaf-friendly symbol in the valley, but I've noticed a couple of films, you know, were not deaf-friendly.
Is it possible that for like the lectures and things they have after the film festival, during the film festival period, that it would be if you requested to go to specific ones, that they would have interpreters for those that you've requested? Would that be the path we're trying to get them to do?
Well, you know the newspaper I'm talking about, they'll actually say, you know, if you want to see this film, if you want to see this presentation, you have to request an interpreter. If they did that, that would help the committee plan better. So if they put that in there. So if they could have, you know, like several of them, you know, during the week.
Several days in advance notice to request the particular movie that they wanted to see.
So again, we
in order to save them money to not provide for every single film, which would be unnecessary.
Do they do that now? Have you had experience with the film festival? Will they do that now? No.
They don't. They have not done it.
Again, so as the city is a title sponsor of the film festival, certainly, Lisa, I think something we could ask of the chairman, who would probably be open to this, would be my belief.
They would be open. I think we need to work on defining what adequate notice is of the request so that we can make that work on both sides.
Mary Ann? Hi, Denise from 1PS, yes. Mary Ann has been working with Paula from 1PS on working into our protocol for ASL interpreters. Are we doing a 72-hour notice for hours? 72 hours, that's what we're doing.
That's correct. The request, you must receive the request within 72 hours prior to the actual date of the event.
So that's what we're doing. They're going to be contacting me if interpreters are needed for our 1PS meetings, community meetings, and then I'll reach out and we'll arrange that. So yes, that we're working with 72 hours.
That's reasonable. So 72 hours. That information has come from interpreters themselves, that tends to be a reasonable advance notice. And Philip is saying sometimes people need to work with their schedules and things like that.
And it can be requested well in advance of 72 hours.
Other organizations?
Palm Springs Cultural Center, the Camelot Theater, they're developing a new program. Education about films, presentations, activities. We have a deaf member in the community who very much wants to go to that, but they can't because there's no interpreter. It's the same issue. Did you want to share the story about the art museum, Marianne? Or, well, you might know more about that, Philip, so go ahead. So when I first moved here, I came into Palm Springs at the Museum of Art. And I'm an art fanatic myself, okay? So I went in there and I asked for an interpreter and I said, no, we don't do that. And I said, well, do you have a script? No, we don't do that either. And I thought, well, perhaps, you know, I could be a docent and lead for the deaf community because I have experience with that and I've done it in other communities before. No, we're not interested in that. So it was a barrage of no's, no, no, no. And they seemed to just be too busy with too many other things I got busy with too many other things to ask for that. But there was one person who came to Palm Springs, a woman, and she got the same thing from the museum when she asked for that, same response. And she decided to file with the Department of Justice. This was 2-3 years later. Finally, a letter was sent to the museum. And lo and behold, now they're providing interpreters. It is wonderful. I have taken tremendous advantage of that, of the interpreters and the guided tours, all that. It's been wonderful. So, and they should promote that actually. For example, there was one about high heels. Did you see that exhibit? Anybody there? It was fabulous. I was so interested in that one. How they designed them based on function and things like that. So architecture also. And there are very well-known architects that have designed some shoes, which I thought was really interesting.
That's funny. Okay, I get it. All right, so do we want to move on with some of the other issues, or are there other organizations you want to discuss? But, so just to summary,
I think we're good on that for now. There might be more later. There's probably more out there. But let's focus on some of these key issues, given our limited time.
Okay.
For example, senior citizen housing, other program services to become accessible, so we can put the organizations on hold and move on with the agenda. But this is just kind of getting your feet a little bit wet.
David, I just want to, last night at the council meeting, we did have interpreters there, but there was no one from the deaf community present. And so I just wanted to remind that starting at the next council meeting, if we get a request, we'll provide an interpreter. But if we don't get a request, we're going to go ahead and cancel the interpreter.
is that okay?
Right.
Or do you want, or no?
I did not know that. I was actually told, I think, about last night's meeting some time ago, saying from now on, it will be upon request. And I thought, oh, okay. And I am sorry that I misunderstood that. I did not know about
That's my fault. I didn't get a chance to talk to you at the last meeting, and so I just went ahead and ordered them just in case you showed up.
Okay. If I would have known that there was an interpreter.
Because we do realize sometimes you have other things to do on a Wednesday night, so.
We're trying to think about the logistics of how we can get a blast out to the deaf community when things like that are going to be happening. We have something, we call it the Coachella Valley Deaf Email Blast. And MAP is saying we're talking about things that are specific to Palm Springs here. So maybe we could modify the list to make it Palm Springs people or include the entire valley, I'm not sure. But in any event, we have a list of Palm Springs deaf residents here. And we can give that to you, and you can take it upon yourself to put out a blast when there are any city events or activities where interpreters would benefit the community. So that way, because how would deaf people know otherwise?
I put out a weekly neighborhood Office of Neighborhoods report. I can get your email address and add you to that, so you're aware of all the upcoming meetings that we have in the city and different events, special events.
I'm sorry, say again, are you Palm Springs?
One Palm Springs?
Yeah,
We're speaking about one
Office
Palm
of
Springs.
Neighborhoods Manager, and I oversee one PS. or work with.
So you wear 2 hats?
Lots of hats.
You know her by name, Phil. When we saw, I could see how you had made eye contact and went, there you are, right? Yeah, so you give her your email and she says, yes, she's just asked for it, so I will do that, Mary Ann says.
All right, for the next item on the agenda, employment, I would like to introduce Perry Madison, who came in late. Perry is our personnel director.
Can you repeat that, please? Philip was looking at the agenda and he missed what the interpreter was signing as you said that, so if you could go ahead.
Yes, moving on, employment at City Hall, next on the agenda.
Uh-huh. And you'd like to introduce?
Perry Madison, who is our, will you raise your hand, Perry? Personnel director. So Perry, I think the question is, the hiring process, if there's deaf applicants, they said that they had known one deaf person who inquired about employment but never received any acknowledgement or response. And I don't know if that's a specific example that you want to talk about, but just why don't we start generally, how will we process an application for a deaf person and what has been our experience?
Okay, yeah, I can talk generally how it works. Our application process is electronic for all applicants, and part of the process for anyone with an requesting an accommodation, regardless of what that may be, a hearing impairment, any kind of accommodation, learning disability, there's a questionnaire that's attached to our applications that's confidential. So we ask anybody that would need an accommodation if they would need one and what that may be. And if there is a special accommodation, we give them several options to reach out to us and let us know what that is. We give them, in this case, we give them our phone number. We also have a TDD line. We have an email. We give them all of that information, which is confidential. We also run reports prior and during the application process, which we would look at if they're going to be going through any testing, if they've requested an accommodation. I've looked at it prior to today's meeting if anyone requested any type of hearing accommodation. We've had 8 in the last 4 years that have requested an accommodation that we've reached out to and been in contact with. Most of those individuals requested some sort of accommodation, whether it be in the testing process or they ended up not needing an accommodation. They just wanted to make us aware of it, that they may need an accommodation in the employment process. Should they get far enough along, there may be some sort of request for essential function review. So we were aware of 8 applicants, but we do provide, we reach out to those applicants who have noticed us. So we try to make as much opportunity available. On our website we have TDD lines, we have email resources available. So that's our general sort of process that we make available to anybody with requesting an accommodation. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have or specifics.
Yeah, Mary Ann says, when you say 8 different requests, are you saying 8 deaf people made requests, or are these 8 requests in general?
We've had many requests for accommodations, 8 specific related to hearing. They may not all be deaf, but they had hearing related requests. They may be just, some sort of hearing request, maybe not all deaf, but we pulled 8 in the last 4 years, specifically related to hearing requests.
And Philip is saying, okay, well then, as many deaf people want to move here to Palm Springs. They apply for jobs. They look for work. There are many companies that are based here in Palm Springs, and those companies are either unresponsive or actually dismissive, and the deaf folks feel discriminated against. I don't know what the skill and qualification and education levels are of these applicants, but this has been a general experience, a pervasive cultural experience. And it's a cultural prevalence that we have here in the Valley against deaf people. And I have to say, it really is an oppression of sorts. So I'm wondering if the city of Palm Springs is trying to make a real an attempt to be diversive and inclusive, both racially, gender orientation, sexual orientation, all that, disability, if that's included into the goal here, you have to take a look at how many of each of these demographics we have in the valley. And in order to make an effort to solicit more diversity, including deaf people, because deaf folks need jobs as much as anybody does. And so that is really one of our major issues.
I would address that first. We certainly spend a good focus on ethnicity and gender and in our hiring practices. But what we have not done as good a job is certainly on the deaf community or the blind community. You're right, it's a cultural barriers that I can just imagine what's there. That being said, I am not certain what the best practices are to kind of break that barrier, at least at City Hall. And, you know, and we asked, Captain, Sergeant, Lieutenant. It's been long.
That's no problem.
He's up to Lieutenant. All right. Abshire to be here. He can address, like, so for example, there's some restrictions on police officers. Some police officers work they can do, some they can't. And you might address that in a moment. There's certain other areas that are more suited for people who are deaf or blind. And so I don't know what the best practices are there. Perry, you may have a better feel of that, but we would welcome your input of how.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, we get the question, not often, but occasionally from individuals who may have some sort of a disability of whatever the nature may be, or some sort of, it may be a slight learning disability, it may be somebody that may need accommodation of some sort. And they come to us and say, you know, how would I qualify for a job, or how would I get a job with the city? And it really comes down to, we talk to them about essential functions of the job. So we encourage them always to apply, go through the process, and really it's a process that we encourage them. We really want you to focus on the essential functions of the job. And some people will come and say, well, you know, I want to be a police officer. And we have to educate them on, you know, California Post has very specific guidelines up for a police officer that, you know, they have strict requirements, physical requirements that we have to get through. So we, you know, we'll provide them with that information, those guidelines, and say, these are what the essential function, these are the hurdles that we're going to have to get through. Every applicant will have to get through. So we'll help them with some of that information, provide that to them. But it's really like, you know, these are the essential functions. You know, the applicants are going to have to do that. Now, in some cases, we'll have a conversation. Now, some of these we can provide you with, you know, the essential functions, and we could probably do with or without a reasonable accommodation. So we might be able to make some you know, accommodations on how these are performed. So we really want to encourage everybody to participate in that process. And I think some of the hurdles have been, I've seen, is some people maybe get discouraged with some of the jobs that they want to do, like police and fire. But I've seen some applicants. Specifically, I've seen a police officer applicant who had a hearing disability. Who, it's hard to talk about everybody's specific individual disabilities, but he made it through the process with, you know, he was born with a severe hearing disability, but he made it all the way through the process, got on an eligible list. At that time, we had, you know, hundreds of applicants we were testing. That's when we were tested 800 police officers at a time in a training capacity, and he did very well. But, you know, at that point, we just, you know, we were not hiring as many officers as we are today. He came back today. He may get much further in the process because we're hiring more officers. But, you know, surprisingly, he did well and he got on an eligible list. But he did it with a disability. And, you know, but we had, you know, 68 people that made it through that process, and we only ended up hiring like 1 or 2 because we had so many other applicants. And he, you know, his scores ultimately, even though we work with people with disabilities and need accommodations, it's a competitive process.
Sorry, I was just having a little trouble
Yeah,
hearing.
no. So it's a competitive process that we just have to work through. But we encourage them always, and we've seen people do very well in the process. Sometimes they just have to come back and try again, and we just want to keep encouraging people to do that. So I think in Palm Springs, we're encouraging of those applicants. We just haven't seen, you know, we want to get them to come and apply more. We just haven't seen a lot of those applicants recently, so.
I would
I'm not
venture
sure
to
if
say,
there's-
do we have any
there's
deaf
a lot of barriers.
employees currently? I don't know that we do.
Yeah, no, I think we have some with some hearing impairments, but not true deaf employees.
I'm wondering if the staff here at the City Hall could use a cultural sensitivity training. The hiring managers could be involved. I'm sure that the applicants who are easy to communicate with are more easily selected than those who are not as easy to communicate with. It's sort of basic psychology, right? It's sort of natural human reaction. You're talking about 68 people who made it, you know, down to the 1 or 2 that end up being hired out of the top 5. Of course, if there's any kind of additional effort that's required to communicate with one of those top applicants, the tendency is going to be, this person's easier to communicate with, so I'm going to hire that person.
Well, let me explain the process a little bit further. In government, it's a competitive process. So you get on an eligible list in government, and you're ranked based on your scores in an examination process. So like for police example, they go through a written test which is governed by POST, which is the California Police Officers Governing Board per se. And then they have to go through agility, which is scored. They have to go through oral boards, which is scored. So all those scores are cumulative, and then they're scored and they're ranked. So if you're 68th on the list, and we have one position.
I'm sorry, when you said oral score, oral board?
Oral board, like a panel that will ask questions.
I see. There you go.
And during that, and even during that, if they ask for an accommodation, just to be clear, if they ask us for an accommodation, we could provide an interpreter. We could provide any kind of assistance, which we have done in the past. If someone asks for assistance or an accommodation, we will provide that. But those scores are then, they're ranked on a list. So if we have one opening and we have 68 people, our personnel rules govern in the process that we only refer 5 applicants from the list. So you may be 68, we just have to work through the number of openings we have. That's why we encourage people to come back and reapply, because at a different time, we may not have as many applicants, or we may have more openings that we would get further down on a list. So even though I say you're on an eligible list, they only last for so long. So you may not even get an interview if you're farther down on the list than the applicant.
So I'd like to offer this. So, you know, you talk about cultural sensitivity training. I think maybe as the first step towards that, we meet regularly for our staff meetings where every department head we meet. And so the people who are generally responsible for all the hiring in the city are at that meeting. It might be helpful to have you join us at one of those meetings, and we talk a little bit about hiring practices and sensitivity. So my department heads can kind of get a feel, sort of like these would be 3 times the size of this in the various departments. So if you'd be willing to do that, I think that might be a good first step.
Well, we are only 3. And there are hospitals, and the police department, and the city hall, and all these organizations. This would become a full-time job at this point, teaching, training, becoming involved, attending meetings, and so forth. We're trying to create a position of a deaf advocate somehow, somewhere. And that person would be the one who would be going to all these trainings and showing up at these meetings.
Well, I'm talking about just about
really
our
is a full-time
department head.
job. Sorry?
I'm talking about just our city staff. Okay. Just an idea, it's just an idea.
Okay. Money talks.
Okay.
Are there any organizations within the deaf community that have raised funds in order to be able to create this kind of advocacy position, which is something I'm certainly familiar with in other minority groups where advocacy organizations hire individuals to advocate on behalf of the needs of the community.
Where everybody's pointing a finger at everybody else. Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't see what Mary. So, the organizations are always crying there is no money, okay? There is an agency in Riverside who is responsible for the entire Riverside County. And I have worked there for several years and have been pestering them, where are the services for our valley? There is,
Free space.
there is free office space here, right? But because the rent and the cost of office supplies is one consideration. So we could actually, so we have set up something where they come one day a month. That's a joke. I mean, the counselor is completely overwhelmed, and it's actually a full-time job, Monday through Friday. We are thinking about approaching Herb Schwartz, Schultz, sorry,
Schultz.
thank you, who takes care of the network. The Desert Care Network.
Desert
We have-
Healthcare District.
We have not yet, yes, we have not had the opportunity to meet with him because we've been so overwhelmed with dealing with the regional hospitals here and so forth. But soon we will be having a meeting with him and we will be bringing up these issues, among others, for the valley.
Do you need an introduction to Herb?
No, we've met, actually, we just haven't done the meeting. We've been in communication via email, thank you, though. And the number one priority is to set up a deaf advocate position. One of many goals we have.
Good. That's a very good route. That's a very good step.
Okay. Do you want to move on the agenda, the ADA coordinator? The question is, wish to understand the appropriate and required communication accessibility for Palm Springs deaf residents and visitors have been included in this mandate. So, yeah, certainly it is included in the ADA, and to the extent that it will be accessible in every area or endeavor that we need to. If we're missing something, that your feedback would certainly be important. Now, Tabby is representing Marcus Fuller, who is our...
Tabby?
Tabby is representing...
Myself here.
Marcus Fuller, who is our actual ADA coordinator. So she assists with that process. So if there's some suggestions that you have, we certainly would be open to them.
Yeah. We do need a point person. Who can inform the deaf community? If there are any sort of access issues, we need a person to get in contact with, instead of us doing all the work on their behalf. For example, here, we're talking about Meisel, we're talking about the film festival. There's an assisted living nursing home. There are many programs and services that just are not accessible to deaf people. Schools. I mean, I don't know about them, but I'm very concerned about the educational that's going on in the mainstream program here in the Valley for deaf children. These people are not trained to work with deaf children. Where is their access to education?
So if I could...
There's a laundry list, okay?
And I think part of the issue for us is, you know, the nuance is that we don't have any control over any of those organizations. What I do need to consider first is anything at City Hall, how do you interact with City Hall? Like for example, I've asked Vicki, who's a Parks Director. Vicki, wait, okay. So for example, and Jeannie, who is a librarian, when you need to interface with anything in the parks or the library, you know, are there issues there? Do you have problems? What can we do to improve that? And so I get you need a point person at City Hall, and that we can do for things in all of City Hall organizations and government and functions. So that's the one thing I must do. What you're saying is I'm not sure how to do the next. But that being said, Marcus is our point person,
Yes.
but we need to think about how do you have a good point person and other short of us calling interpreters or having interpreters on staff. So the one thing that we have implemented, we give a 5% pay increase to people who are bilingual. We've also included that now for who can do sign language. But obviously that's not helping us immediately. We don't have anyone on staff who can do sign language at the moment, so we would need to call interpreters. You do?
I know one.
Oh, great.
I know one in the building department, or the building permit department. He can go A, B, C.
So Vicki, tell,
One of my lifeguards, actually, that's what she's going to school for and has been going to school for the last 3 years, is ASL. So we haven't had any encounters with, you know, hearing impaired, but she's available, and actually we used her to help teach our little Tiny Tot kids sign language, and at their graduation they actually sang a song and did sign language along with it.
Good.
So
good. And then the library, I don't know, your experience, have you had to call, tell us a little bit about the library experience.
Well, we had a request recently to offer closed captioning at our films. And so whenever possible, we offer closed captioning. We do have some limitations sometimes when we do films that are from the not the Short Fest, but the American Documentary Film Festival. Since those movies are not commercial movies, we don't have they're not captioned. So whenever possible, we do captioning on our movies, and we put the closed caption symbol on our brochures so that you can see that. And then we also have 15,000 DVDs at the library available for checkout that most of them offer captioning. But we always try to help our customers, and we have interacted several times with people who either are hard of hearing or deaf, and we will do whatever it takes to help our customers. So we have turned we have at our reference desk, we have 2 monitors, one that faces the customer, and we've done a keyboard swap where we'll type a question and then they'll type a question, or we'll just communicate on Word if we have to, and just to make sure that we understand the question being asked.
Well, I have a question for all of you here at the table. I'm wondering if, you're talking about access, this is great. This is great, but the frontline people, oftentimes the administrators or the higher-ups know, but the frontline folks don't. So when deaf people come up, you get sort of this sort of like, I don't know, I can't help you response. Even though the people higher up have an awareness, I believe that the frontline people do need to have some kind of training of what to do when they do encounter a deaf person and how to communicate and what to do. The same is true of Desert Regional. You've got an ADA specialist, but you have no communication down lower through the ranks when a deaf person shows up at the hospital. We're working on that right now, on how to increase the communication and the training and the education with the folks who are lower down. Did you want to add anything, Mary Ann?
Looks
Am I
pretty
making
good to me. Looks good.
okay. The final item on your list is parades. and interpreters for parades and things of that nature. So for example, I'm trying to think, parades, we have a section at the viewing booth for ADA, for viewing stand would be for any disability, right, or for any deaf, I presume deaf, blind, any would be there.
And we've provided
Provided
ASLs for the parades in the past.
So would that be, oh, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the three of us, we've recently met with the chairperson of the Gay and Lesbian Pride Parade on the committee there. And he was explaining that 95% of the volunteers, of the interpreters are volunteers. And they asked us to help us find volunteer interpreters. Interpreters make their living from interpreting. It's not necessarily appropriate to ask a working interpreter to do that. Students are the people who like to accept those opportunities in order to practice their sign language. And so just to go off track for a little bit, but I will come back. Would you pay the police people to manage the parade, or would you ask them to volunteer? Are they volunteering? How about the people who clean the streets after the parade? Are they volunteering to do that, or are they
But we're not
getting paid?
asking anyone to volunteer. We're not asking anyone to volunteer.
Okay, so there you go. The same story would go for interpreters, I would hope.
But we don't control the Gay Pride Parade organization. We can request that they have, well, for any parade that we do, we absolutely will have
We have.
interpreters. We
We have
have and
interpreters and we
will,
pay them.
and we guarantee that to you. For the Pride Parade, parades that we provide some funding for, we absolutely will make that request of them. That, at least I'll let you maybe.
Yeah. Was it Mr. DeHart that you were meeting with? Ron DeHart? Is that who you met with from Palm Springs Pride?
I'm not sure. I can't remember the man's name. I met him several months ago. A bigger man.
About 6'2".
Yeah, big guy, tall too.
Okay, that was Ron.
Very nice man.
He is, and he's a very good friend of mine, and I will reach out to him directly.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And it's not just the Gay and Lesbian Pride parade that I'm talking about. This is sort of a general, all kinds of Palm Springs parades. Anything where there's kind of public address, public event, music events, anybody at a speaker at a podium. Marianne is saying that topic that is on the agenda because we went to the city council meeting, not last one, but the previous one, and observed that the decision had been made for the Walk of Stars program with the Chamber of Commerce to manage the money better, the budget better than it had been done previously. We were mentioning the parade as an example because it's a public event. There's a large public turnout, and deaf people are part of that large public turnout. The parades are popular. Parades are popular events, and there are many deaf people who like to participate in them and be present. So the subject that is on the agenda specifically because it needs to be considered in the funding for interpreters. Because I'm repeating myself, it's a public event.
Yes, that we can do. Because most of the parades
If I
are.
could ask, what is the average cost for a good quality ASL interpreter by hour or by half day?
The right person to be asked would be these people here. Martin has set up an agency in Palm Springs, specifically an interpreter agency, and Marianne is saying, personally, I'm not qualified to answer that question. So
I'm just
I
trying to
don't
get a
know.
sense of,
I would
Anthony,
defer to
Anthony
Martin.
would
What do
know,
we
just
pay?
because from our experience hiring it.
Our council meetings, I think because you have to have two.
right,
And so you have to have two people and you're paying by the hour. I believe for about a 4-hour meeting, we're spending about $750, $800. So it's about $100 an hour, two people.
that helps, okay.
Marianne is saying, what do you think about, oh, when you think about it, the deaf people who live here in the valley aren't just, and I'm not talking about Palm Springs only, I'm talking about visitors and the Greater Valley. They are supporting the economy here. They eat out, they eat at our restaurants, they go to our parks, they sleep in our hotels, they support the economy. And so ideally, but we pay the same taxes at the restaurants as the hearing people do. But the hearing people, what do you say?
Yeah,
Hold on. What did you say?
we buy clothes, we pay taxes.
Oh, here's Philip's
We-
adding, we spend lots of money on
We
clothes.
shop when we're sitting here, we go to bars.
Yeah, he spends lots of money on clothes, not me, okay? But anyway, the point is, I wanted to point out that deaf people are supporting the economy here. And so I feel like there's a reciprocity that could and should happen. That would be great.
You're right.
I think we've covered most things on the agenda. Any, maybe one thing I would be interested in hearing, and that's why I did have the parks and library here. Have you had any issues interacting with either of those organizations?
Libraries? No. Marianne is saying, I do read books, but I buy them. I love movies, but I go to the theater, or I subscribe to Hulu. So I don't go to the library myself. I donate books that I bought, and that might be the first time that I've ever gone into the library when I moved here, but
I'm thinking if the library and the parks and other places actually promoted and did some outreach to inform the community that they offer accessible services, that would make the deaf community aware that they are indeed accessible. Because traditionally, over the years, they've not been accessible and people have become complacent and not even bothered. So promotion is key, informing the community is key.
Okay.
He made
Phil-
a comment
oh, sorry.
recently about deaf people wanting to work here in our city. And we have a population of young people here, younger adults, and they're just choosing not to move here because there's no opportunity, there's no work. And so mostly we have retirees here, people my age, you know, but they want to come here for their retirement years, but they also want to participate in park activities. That's not particularly on my list right now. It used to be. But we want to draw younger people to this valley to live here. And when we have younger people, we can sort of step down a little bit and let them take the reins. They have the energy and they have the ambition, they have the ideas, they have the new ideas. They're familiar with social media, they're a more progressive demographic instead of us dinosaurs.
Any final questions, thoughts?
What's next?
We-
Well, actually, I do want to thank the city hall, the city council, and particularly you, Lisa, for taking the lead here with ensuring support for the deaf community. We really appreciate. We see the votes that have been passed in the budget. We've seen your presentations for the budget. That was 2 weeks ago. That was fascinating. I was just dumbstruck. Every other thing that you said, I was completely captivated. So thank you all, the city council, for what you are doing.
So maybe we can type up some sort of follow-up on certain items that we can follow up on.
Well, and I brought mine and Marcus's cards for contact information that you guys can get a hold of us on.
Speak up, please.
I brought mine and Marcus's business cards with our TDD numbers on there for you guys to contact us for follow-up, or you're more than welcome to come into the office as well.
Yeah, so,
So TDD does work
let me
anymore.
inform Todd.
Yeah, we're gonna find a better way than TDD, just, yeah. We'll-
Yeah, those are outdated, they're kind of, they're obsolete dinosaurs. Okay, that we use text messaging now, or we actually use a relay service, which is a video phone, live streaming video. We can just go ahead and call, and there's an interpreter that pops up as a third party. That's a service that's for us, and they'll interpret for me live streaming video, much like FaceTime.
Well, not only is it TBD obsolete now, but that term, hearing impaired, is also a big no-no. We are deaf, as in DEAF, and or hard of hearing. But we do not, we are not broken. Do I look broken to anybody here? Am I impaired? Are these folks impaired? They look good to me. So please don't use the term impaired. Try to let go of that archaic term and just use the term deaf. And just like deaf and dumb is no longer acceptable, it is archaic. Or deaf and mute is no longer acceptable. I mean, I have a voice. I am not mute by any means. So do try to remember that deaf and hard of hearing are the preferred terms, okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Could I ask a question real quick? I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask about the video conferencing or video chat, what service that is, so that we could get that at the library? Because, is it just something online?
You use a normal telephone number. It's a video phone. And
Like this one?
you would,
Sorry.
and you would,
She's calling me.
you would call, somebody would call the library number. So we deaf at home would use a video relay in order to call your regular library phone number. There's not a special access number.
Oh.
But it would be nice if you had a computer set up whereby people, maybe 1 or 2 screens that have webcams attached to them. So that when we go to the library, we could use the webcam in order to make actual telephone calls with the video relay interpreter service
Okay.
on your computers.
Would we recommend that she visit Sorensen.com
Sorensen,
to find that information?
The Sorensen.com is available online.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know, where to go.
Will you check that out, Tabby? So just so we can get rid of all of these TDD lines. No one uses those, but I want to make sure we replace them with what we need to replace them with, and that's what I'm not clear on.
So I'll give you an example. I'll give you my telephone number. You'll call that telephone number just like with your regular phone, okay? And you're going to reach a video relay service automatically, okay? My number connects to that. And then somebody's there is going to be an interpreter, and they're going to say, hello, this is Philip Rubin. I'm not home right now. Please leave a message. And you can go ahead and just speak directly. Hey, Philip, blah, 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 blah. And the interpreter is going to leave him a sign mail, okay? And it's video. It's kind of like a little vlog. And I can call you back through that same service if I don't answer the phone and speak live at the time. So you can speak to me that way.
And the same when you call into City Hall? Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if, just so I'm clear, we don't need to replace it with anything because you have it on your end? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Some people who are quite older and not savvy with technology may still have some TDDs, so I wouldn't throw them in the garbage just yet.
Okay.
There are a lot of very old people that are uncomfortable with technology, and the only thing that they really know, they're very reluctant. You know, a couple of them are still, you know, they don't want to learn how to use the video phone, or they don't want to even learn email.
Yeah, we
so
still
they're
get a
just
lot.
getting, you know,
We
so
still get-
Yes,
keep what
we do.
you have.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
But we have
Thank you.
received them that way as well, just not on the video end.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
We have received the phone calls the way you're describing, just not on the video end where it's just not the signed mail.
You might not know,
Well,
because the interpreter is just speaking to you, so you may not even
No,
know
no.
that there's somebody deaf on the other end.
no, that's what I'm saying, we do receive those. I said we just don't have the video portion of it available.
And you wouldn't, right?
No.
Yeah, you don't need it. Philip is saying, when I actually speak with the interpreter, like I'll leave a message on your voice machine, and I'll be speaking directly to you. You know, so why would you need a video for when I'm speaking to you?
No, I'm saying when what they were talking about having available at the library with the webcams and setup, saying we don't have that now here, but we do receive and can utilize the service you're talking about.
So the library, people would go in and sometimes use the computer, right? Libraries are for that reason, purpose sometimes. And as a matter of principle, you know, that's providing accessibility if there would be a video camera so that people could make telephone calls if need be. Now, in your situation, you're not the library, so it would just be a regular phone call to you.
Yes, no, I
And our computers do have webcams built in now. So,
Perfect.
so you could bring your own, well, you wouldn't need headphones, but you could just, since you wouldn't be speaking and making noise, you could do signing on the video chat and it would work out just perfectly on our computers.
Yeah, there are some deaf people who can't afford their own video phones at home because they've got to pay for an internet connection, and it has to be a pretty strong internet connection. So they would want to go to the library in the event that there's an emergency, or they want to talk to their mother, or they need to make a phone call for whatever important reason. So do you need the spelling of Sorensen? It's S-O-R-E-N-S-O-N.
I have it up right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you all again.
Thank you again. Thank you, everybody.
We are indebted.
Well, thanks for. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you, my dear. Thank you. Thank you.
Come up and say.
So you can answer it that way if you want.
So, and that's what I did, because we got like
Abby, thank you.
3 or 4.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, maybe that, well, that's good.
So, I added
sounds good, all right. Boom, all right. Thank you.
Okay, it was a pleasure.
Nice to meet you, thank you. Thanks, you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Very positive. Let's keep the progress going. Do you want me to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, to the local hospitality community, to do some cultural awareness?
Especially related to employment. Hotels, restaurants, there are a lot of deaf people who are applying and they're not even getting jobs there. Even doing a busboy, cleaning dishes, things like that, they're not even getting that position.
So if I can arrange to talk to some of those community groups, would you want to come with me?
I can. I would have to have it, though.
I can, but I have to have an interpreter.
Of course, of course.
Okay.
And perhaps, you could do several groups, like one, one by one. Hit several birds with one stone, so the John Speaker interpreter, for each of them multiple times, you can do, several of them gathered together.
Let me do some homework, and then I'll be in touch.
No, work out the logistics.
Yeah, work out the logistics.
Will I go with you?
What